Chapter 18. I have an idea, Littlest suggested to Thin Elderly. They were huddled together in the hallway again. It was the third night that the Sinistede had roared through the wall, and with his hissing breath inflicted a cruel nightmare on the little boy. For 3 nights they had watched helplessly during the infliction, and then with concern as the woman had come in the night to comfort the boy when he cried out. And what would that be? He asked her. I think I must touch the dog, she whispered solemnly. Thin Elderly looked startled. Surely, you know that we do not touch living creatures, he said to her. Only for fear of waking them, she pointed out. But the dog sleeps so very soundly. He even snores. And remember how light my touch is? Even when Fastidious was mad at me, she still said I had a wonderful touch. She reached out and fluttered her fingers very lightly against him. And you told me once that my touch was like gossamer. I don't know what that means exactly, she added with a giggle. Gossamer is something very fragile and delicate, Thin Elderly explained. Sometimes it means a cobweb. Oh, how sweet. I do love cobwebs. There was one in a corner of the woman's parlor once, behind the piano, and I danced in it. There was a moon that night, and it just seemed the right thing to do, dancing in a moonbeam and a cobweb. Fastidious scolded me, though. Thin Elderly smiled. My dancing touch was so delicate that I didn't even break the strands of the cobweb. I am quite certain I could touch the dog. Thin Elderly nodded. Your touch is exquisitely dainty, littlest one. I don't believe I've ever known a daintier one. And perhaps you would be able to touch the dog without waking him. But what good would it do? Littlest explained carefully in a whisper. The boy is so weak, and the nightmares come again and again. Thin Elderly nodded sadly. That's true, he agreed. Each time they destroy more and more of the memories and fragments he has. The ones we've given him and the ones he brought with him. And he has so little for me to touch and give back to him in dreams, Thin Elderly. He has a chrysalis now, that he found out in the garden, and the woman let him keep it in a jar in his room. He's very gentle with it because she explained how a butterfly was being made inside. So it's a nice thing for me to touch. I can give him that fragment of gentleness and taking care of. But it's a very small thing, and there aren't many others. There's the pink seashell that he keeps on the table, and it's the most valuable thing, I think, because it has so many memories. I can feel them there, and it's part of his own story. Remember he wanted shells when she told him that story that began, Once upon a time there was a little boy? He nodded. But it's also very small, she sighed. Thin Elderly smiled at her as she spoke so earnestly. She was barely larger than the seashell herself. There's a photograph, too, that he keeps in an inside pocket of his suitcase, she went on. It's of a woman. There are a lot of fragments coming from that picture, but they're mixed. The feelings of them are all mixed up. I try to sift through and collect the good parts. And that's really all. His clothes don't give me much of anything. The social work lady brought his clothes, so really, all I have, all that's worth touching, are the chrysalis and the seashell and the picture. But Thin Elderly, she looked up at him. Guess what? He looked at her quizzically. What? He's starting to love the dog. I can feel it. And so, Thin Elderly, hesitating, considered what she had said. I need to touch the dog. Lightly, of course. In a very gossamer way. And I can give the boy the love feelings, along with the gentle chrysalis feelings, and the warm happiness seashell feelings, and the good part of the photograph feelings. It will make it work better, adding in the dog. I'm sure of it. Make him much, much stronger against the nightmares. She looked up at Thin Elderly. Could I try, at least? She pleaded. Thin Elderly eased himself up from the huddling place. 3 nights in a row they had to hide this way, hunched over. He was achy. Come with me, he whispered. The woman is worn out from getting up at night. I'm going to bestow a wonderful restorative dream on her. I've collected it from the parlor. I found it there in the old crocheted afghan she keeps over the back of the sofa. Her mother wrapped her in that afghan. One Christmas morning when she was a very little girl, there was snow outside and a new doll under the tree, and it was one of the happiest mornings of her life. I was quite delighted to find it there unused, ready to be collected. While I'm doing that, littlest one, you may touch the dog. Oh, thank you, she whispered. No need for thanks, he replied. No time. We must work quickly. We must try to help the boy.